From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is RoadSigns. And now here's your host, Michael Fries.
Thank you for listening to RoadSigns, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. We welcome you to this special two-part year in review episode. In this first part, we'll pose the following questions. How has the trucking industry fared this year in areas of technology, equipment safety, and regulation? And what non-COVID events proved to be the most impactful in 2020? We'll set out to answer these questions, and we'll sit down with Transport Topics staff reporter Eleanor Lamb later in the program. But first, I want to answer another question that may have been on the minds of many listeners lately, and that is, where is Seth Clevenger? Well, there's no need to worry. After a multi-month podcast sabbatical, he has returned. We would like to welcome back to RoadSigns, Seth Clevenger, Managing Editor of Transport Topics Features. Welcome back, Seth.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's great to be back on the podcast, this time as a guest rather than the host, and I appreciate the change of pace, and it's great to be back.
Great. I'm glad to have you back. Thanks for letting me take the reins for a while. Let's get into the year in review. That was 2020. There's been many things that were happening. One we will not mention until the next episode. But let's go back to the first episode of 2020. We look back at 2019 and at the progress of artificial intelligence, federally mandated electronic logging devices, and the Internet of Things. Besides the pandemics, how have things progressed since then? I mean, and what have you been seeing that's been making progress in 2020?
Well, sure, Mike. There's certainly been a lot of news developments, a lot of investment in technology throughout the year. Obviously, so much of attention has gone toward the pandemic, which has been so disruptive to so many facets of life and business. But through this all, we've seen a lot happen on the technology side of the transportation industry. Fleets continue to invest, and if anything, the experience of this pandemic seems to have shined a spotlight on the need for solid software investments and process automation. So some of those big trends that we were tracking at the beginning of the year before all this happened, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, the widespread use of ELDs, the Internet of Things. A lot of that has, I think, proven its value during a time like this. That those companies that had really invested in IT, had invested in back office automation and software, were really in a much better position to make the move to remote work in the spring, for their back offices. Now, obviously, truck drivers don't have that luxury, as frontline workers, but for logistics workers, for dispatchers, for fleet managers, there's been a lot of investment in technology, a lot of reliance on technology to help adapt to this very unusual year that we've all been going through.
One of the things that you have talked about, it's not particularly pressing maybe in this moment in time, just sort of the prevalence of 5G in the industry. Back early in the year, you spoke with Chris Wolf about that prevalence.
If you're not planning and starting your upgrade process right now, you're already probably behind the eight ball. But that being said, 5G will be phenomenally prevalent, I'd say 3 to 4 years out. So in the next 18 to 24 months, though, they've already started repurposing 3G spectrum in some places. So if you're 3G only right now, you might go dark. There's already places we've heard of in Wisconsin. We can see them near New York City. So again, it's because our systems, if you're in a trailer, a tractor, a chassis, or truck, that's a moving asset, and so you'll be in and out of coverage. And so when it gets in coverage, it all syncs back up. So we kind of hide the fact that you this one area was only dark for a little while, but over time that's just going to get bigger and bigger black holes out there.
Could you just give a sense of where we're at in 5G and just sort of the preparation that the fleets are taking to be in sync with that?
Sure. Well, 5G is still a bit out on the horizon for the trucking industry and for really just about any industrial sector. It's really starting with consumers, especially in cities. but it's really it's going to take years before the coverage is widespread enough to, and really is at a point where it'll be ideal for commercial transportation. That being said, there's certainly um, opportunities down the line. And I tend to think of 5G as really more um, as the next progression. It's the next step. It's the next advancement. Not necessarily revolutionary, right? I mean, 3G to 4G was an improvement. 4G to 5G will be, another move toward more reliability, faster speeds, which is of course important in trucking when you're relying on ELDs, for example, or when you're relying on telematics systems on your trucks, if you're relying on asset tracking devices, so you know where your trucks are, you know where your trailers are, you know how your drivers are performing, you know how many hours of drive time they have left in their day, and you can manage your whole fleet better. That's really become table stakes in the trucking industry. So any advancement in wireless communications will be uh, a very welcome improvement in our industry. Of course, the more immediate concern on wireless technology has been the sunsetting of 2G and 3G networks. We're really now at the point where 4G LTE is the industry standard in trucking for all these onboard devices that are now so common, whether it be onboard computers, ELDs, um, truck and trailer tracking systems. This is really something that's mission critical. So, any existing 3G devices out there are quickly becoming outmoded as some of those networks are being sunset by the wireless carriers, and 4G LTE will be the standard for some time to come, and 5G will come into play in trucking. I think after it's become pretty commonplace and widespread in the consumer market. So it's one of those areas where all the consumers with their new smartphones will be the first to really benefit. But once the coverage is really widespread, it'll make sense for trucking, because you think about trucking, it's cross country, it's all regions of the country, it's interstate, it's coast to coast. Coverage is king if you're in trucking.
Yes, that's what Chris Wolf was talking about. Chris Wolf being the CEO of Powerfleet. Um, when you had that conversation with him, he did touch upon just kind of the dead spaces, and the truck being a moving asset. And I think I think you did nail the point exactly with just getting out of the G3 spectrum, and to make room for the 5G. So that, I mean, that was, that's been one thing this year that I've seen, and you as well, on when it comes to progress and fleets, at least thinking about, the next progression. Another place where we've seen fleets progress is in the area of safety, especially with the adoption of active safety technology and the emergence of automatic steering and double platooning. And you had spoke with Mike Perkins, one of the test drivers for a platoon prone system from Peloton Technology. Yeah, he gave a brief description of what it was.
Peloton's Platoon Pro system is a driver assistive platooning system. And from a driver's perspective, it feels a lot like what we would consider super adaptive cruise control. The system electronically links the collision avoidance systems of a pair of heavy trucks so that they can draft safely to save fuel. And I'm talking drafting just like NASCAR.
I just kind of wanted to talk with you about the advances and just the implementations of those particular technologies.
Well, sure. I mean, happy to provide an update. This has been, I think that there's been a gradual movement and gradually increasing adoption of active safety technology in trucking over the last decade or so. Collision mitigation systems have been on the market for years, but there's been a real push to really increase the market penetration, because if it's just a luxury item that only a few fleets equip their vehicles with, and there's only so much improvement we'll see in terms of real safety on the highways. But I hear from the suppliers, the companies that develop these systems, that there's been a real uptick in adoption. Uh, Groups like FMCSA, and ATA's Technology and Maintenance Council have been promoting this, and uh, ways that fleets can really look at the benefit, do a cost benefit analysis on active safety. And we I think we're seeing some real movement in that direction. We're on our way to the point where um, more new trucks are going to have this technology than not. Of course, there's a lot of older trucks on the road, and will be for many years to come. But uh, I think we're kind of hitting that tipping point where this will start to become pretty much a standard on new vehicles. With existing technology like automatic emergency braking, lane departure warnings, adaptive cruise control, some of these basic driver assist technologies that can uh, really help either prevent or at least reduce the severity of accidents, of collisions on the highway. In most cases, in the majority of cases, it's the passenger cars that are around the truck that are more likely to cause an accident. But uh, technology like this can still help prevent those situations, can help back up the driver and augment the driver's, the professional driver's abilities, which has, in many cases, you talk to the fleet managers who have adopted these systems, and they say it really has made a difference in the severity of crashes and the frequency of crashes. So we know it works, and it's there, it's available, and we're seeing more adoption. And then you look ahead, you look at some of the newer technologies that are just starting to enter the market, and automated steering is in that phase right now, where we do see some of those capabilities that are on the market now. Corrective steering to help nudge the vehicle back in its lane, to help maintain the vehicle's lane. Again, the driver is still driving, but when you have some level of steering assistance added to the braking and acceleration assistance that's already been widely available, so you start to have a complete package of what will be the beginnings of what's known as level 2 automation. This is where you have both steering and acceleration and braking, and we're just in the early days in the market of that. And we're seeing that hit the market and roll out before our very eyes this year. Now, going back to truck platooning, which you mentioned, that's still more in the testing and development phase. You have a couple companies that are working on this in the North American market. One of those is Peloton. We spoke with a couple test drivers who were gracious enough to share their experiences. And I remarked at the time what a cool job that would be to go out and test platooning technology. So as far as truck driving jobs go, I mean, that would be a pretty interesting one to have, and help really blaze the trail and pave the way for some of these emerging technologies. And Locomation is another company that's working on this. Those are the two main tech companies that are actively developing truck platooning capabilities, and they have fleet pilots underway. There's testing, there's on-road testing, not just on test tracks, but on the road today, being tested in many parts of the country. And the idea is, on one hand, to improve fuel economy. You'll have two trucks that are following. The follower truck is following at a much closer distance than we would normally deem safe on the highway, but they can do that through vehicle to vehicle communications that link up the braking systems on both trucks. So the lead truck starts braking, the second truck, there's very little delay, like almost immediately, faster than a human could respond. So what that does is it allows for essentially a drafting, where you have a more aerodynamic platoon on the highway that saves fuel economy. And beyond that, there's also some opportunities for efficiency gains, for helping the driver and the follower truck reach the point where you can actually step away from the wheel and go into the sleeper berth. So the lead truck is still being actively piloted. The driver is driving at all times, but if you're fortunate enough to be in the follower truck, then you can maybe take a break while you're out on the open highway and get some rest, maybe catch us up on some other work, have less fatigue at the end of the day. And that's being tested today. It's not commercially available yet. It's still proving itself with pilot customers, and there's still test drivers behind the wheel now. But that's an example of where platooning could go next. And there are some companies that are working to make that a reality. And beyond that, of course, we also have a growing number of companies that are working on highly automated trucks. Companies like Too Simple, Waymo, originally the Google self-driving car project is also testing trucks and has been for a while. Those companies are also partnering up with truck OEMs like Navistar and Daimler. So there's been really a lot of development this year on all facets of automated driving, everything from the existing ADAS systems, ADAS being advanced driver assist systems, through sort of next level, level 2 with automated steering, and all the way up to truck platooning and potentially autonomous trucks as well.
From time to time, an issue commands so much of the industry's attention that it requires a deeper dive, a resource readers can turn to, a Transport Topic special report. Recently, battery-powered trucks were the subject of one of these reports. We've also dedicated special reports to electric logging devices and, going back a few years, the earliest days of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's CSA program. In November, we're turning our attention to another big issue, the rise in nuclear verdicts and the difficult climate for trucking insurance. In every case, we're working to provide our readers with information, analysis, and clarity on key issues confronting fleets. One comprehensive resource packed with insights that can give you the edge. Transport Topics invites you to learn more about our special reports. To reserve your copy of the latest report, visit ttn.ws/insurance.
You spoke about autonomous trucks. I spoke with John Kearney when I had a chance to host RoadSigns for our workforce development series, and he had a very a grand view of where he saw automated truck driving, where the whole scene of the workplace scene, at least, would be somewhat like an office cubicle, but the cubicles will be filled with workers who are virtually driving trucks across the country. He had envisioned a scene such as that, where there would be an office full of people virtually driving trucks.
Well, that's one of the visions. That's one of the technology pathways that some companies have pursued. That's I would say that's probably not the lead contender for the business models that are on the table. But there's many different ideas on how this could all play out. And one thing I'll say is that it will take years, and really not just years but decades, for this to really materialize. So it's not something where we're going to get to the end of 2021 and do our year in review and say, hey, trucking is automated now. This is a gradual evolution that we see happening today with some of the active safety technologies that we've been discussing earlier. That's the beginnings, and we'll see a gradual expansion in the years ahead, and ultimately that's going to benefit safety and hopefully improve the job of the truck driver, and make improve job satisfaction, and help drivers have more home time. I think those are ultimately the true benefits that can play out in the years ahead.
Yeah, I just brought that up just for that was my first time hearing something, a vision such as that. It's something that's as you said, in the long near future. But that was just thinking of that visually. Just kind of it really intrigued me. Another thing that intrigued me, just kind of when you're talking about forward-looking vision, you had spoken with Stuart Weedeye, CEO of Blossman Gas and president of the Alliance Autogas network. He had an interesting take on the future of the commercial vehicle in general, and that was just in association with the electric car and the electric vehicle commercially used, of course.
First of all, I'm a great believer in hybridization. We should have electric batteries with some sort of internal combustion or turbine engine recharging the battery along with regenerative braking on the vehicles. That is the perfect combination and leads us into the future. Maybe it's not as sexy as being all electric. The second thing is I think our country needs to invest in renewable liquid fuels. One of the things that is often misunderstood in 1970, a vehicle's emissions compared to one today is 99% less today than it was in 1970. And from going simply from port injection to a direct injection to other turbine and turbocharging options that are going to happen into the future, we're going to see internal combustion engines get better and cleaner and more efficient. So the internal combustion engine is not dead. So when you put it in conjunction with the smaller electric battery, it's not as doesn't require as many materials and renewable liquid fuels, I think we have a great opportunity to make tremendous impact on the cost, but improve our environment and deal with the climate issues that are facing our nation and the globe.
One of the things I wanted to talk with you about, there's been a lot of, implementation, and I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, is sort of kind of in a holding pattern when it comes to optimization and electric cars. Do you see that moving a little bit in 2021?
Well, I mean, I think that with electric vehicles and fuels, alternative fuels in general, uh, we're at a point now where uh, we're still in the early days for electric trucks, battery electric trucks. But when you look at the investments, when you look at the first models that are now not just you know not have not just been unveiled, but are also on the road moving freight now in as part of pilot projects with a number of fleets, and there are a growing number of trucking companies that have at least one battery electric truck that they're testing and learning about and seeing how they really perform out on the road. It's becoming clear that at least for certain applications that are well suited to it, so local delivery, urban distribution, some regional haul applications, port drayage, and some vocational trucks like refuse trucks are well suited for electrification in the near future. It's going to take time. We're just starting to see the beginnings of this, but certainly looks like the main alternative to diesel powered trucks at some point in the future will be electric. I mean, today it's natural gas. Today, natural gas is maybe a couple percentage points of the total market. That's if you want something other than diesel, that's primarily what you're looking at. But when you look further out down the line, there's going to be, in some regions, in some states, a push toward zero emission vehicles, and that will include commercial vehicles. And you look at California, for example, they've approved a regulation that'll require a certain percentage of sales to be electric powered trucks, starting in 2024, and then gradually increasing over time. So again, you just follow the investments, you follow the trends. Electric trucks are going to be a big part of the future of the trucking industry. And I do think that this year really helps solidify that, I think. And we'll see how it plays out next year as we see more expansion of some of these early test pilots that fleets are running. And, we'll see more electric vehicle models on the market. We've seen some of that already, and we'll see more in the months and years ahead. So it's really kind of an exciting time where we're seeing a whole new category of the commercial vehicle market emerge before our very eyes. And diesel trucks are going to be around for a very long time, especially long haul, irregular route, truckload, where you have different routes that you're not just repeating the same route again and again. That'll be the probably about the last vehicle application that would be electrified down the line at some point in the future, decades down the line. But we're going to see this new category begin to emerge, and it is pretty fascinating.
Well, another thing that's been fascinating is, and this is kind of my favorite part of things, is the mergers and acquisitions part of our conversation. Um, there's been some notable mergers for 2020. I just kind of want you to elaborate on some of the more noticeable and impactful mergers of 2021. What do you have in mind? What do you think?
Oh, sure. So I can take that from the top, and one that's been, I think, broadly, expected, and it has indeed played out, is Trayton Group's pending acquisition of Navistar. So that's a huge agreement that's in place that will merge two global truck manufacturing companies and create really a true global footprint for Trayton Group, which is Volkswagen's commercial vehicles and truck and bus group. But that has been years in the making. Those two companies formed an alliance in 2017, to provide technology. With the A26 engine in particular, it's available in Navistar international models now. Um, and we'll see how that reshapes the chessboard, the playing field for the truck OEMs moving forward. And that's expected to close in the middle of next year, in the middle of 2021. But that's something that certainly is um, one of those landmark mergers, one of those landmark acquisitions that we watched this year. And then, more specifically in the trucking technology sector that I cover, Omnitrax acquiring Smart Drive this year was a really interesting move. That combines Omnitrax, which is one of the largest providers of ELDs, telematics systems for trucks, mobile communications, with Smart Drive, which is one of the largest suppliers of onboard video systems, video safety technology, and analytics. So that's a really interesting combination. And a lot of that is tied into the idea of tighter integration of all these disparate systems that are now appearing in truck cabs. You have an ELD, you've got an onboard camera, you've got maybe a trailer tracking system, you've got a telematic system in the truck. You may have three or four different devices from three or four different companies on a truck now. And part of the idea, part of the opportunity, I think, for Omnitrax and Smart Drive is to tie some of that together. You can obviously achieve a certain level of efficiency if you share your technology rather than uh, integrating all these disparate systems. So that's something to watch in the years ahead. Trimble acquired a company called Cubix, so that's a big move in the transportation management software piece of the business that we continue to watch. And also mention that very recently we saw that Penske Logistics has agreed to acquire Black Horse Carriers, a big dedicated carrier. So that will combine two of the top 100 largest for-hire carriers on the TT Top 100 list, number 15 and number 61. And that is one of the larger acquisitions we've seen in the motor carrier space, going back to Knight Swift, that merger about 3 years ago.
There's a lot of moving in the market. So I mean, it's it would be suffice to say, to mention what's been going on for that last year. Seth, I think this is a good place to stop. I just wanted to thank you, number one, for being on the show, and I just wanted to say personally for hosting the Road Signs podcast for this year. I'm really blessed to have joined this team and be a part of this. So I definitely want to thank you for that experience and making it a very enjoyable year for me as well, being a part of the Transport Topics Road Signs team. So I definitely want to thank you for that.
Well, hey, thanks. We're certainly happy to have you on board. It's I think we were the lucky ones. We appreciate having your voice on the podcast, and it's and frankly, I think it's also fun to kind of pass the responsibility back and forth, pass the hosting duties back and forth, and we can all pursue our different interests and hopefully provide that much more content and insight to our listeners, and thanks to our listeners as well for following the podcast. This has been a fun ride, and I look forward to many more episodes to come.
In times like these, it's crucial to stay informed. Transport Topics is offering all the information you need to make business decisions in these unprecedented times. And in the wake of the many event cancellations and group gatherings, TT ensures a virtual way to consume business content and conversation. To join the conversation and stay ahead of the news, follow Transport Topics on all social outlets or by visiting ttn.ws/stay informed.
Next on Road Signs, we continue our year in review with Transport Topics staff reporter Eleanor Lamb. Welcome to the show, Eleanor.
Good to be with you, Michael.
Great. I'm glad to have you on. One thing I wanted to talk about 2020 is the new rule that was cast upon by the FMCSA, the hours of service. I just wanted you to just give us a brief explanation of the rule and what it consists of.
That's right, Michael. Yeah, I got to tell you, this was probably the most significant regulatory action that was taken this year that had to do with the trucking industry. FMCSA published its long-awaited final rule on those hours of service on May 14th. It was announced by Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao and then FMCSA Acting Administrator Jim Mullen, who has since moved on from that post. And this final rule included 4 revisions that truckers had been voicing a lot of concerns about. The industry really had been looking forward to this. And those 4 revisions covered a few different topics, such as the 30-minute rest break and splitting up time in the sleeper berth. Specifically, the final rule granted more flexibility for the 30-minute rest break by requiring a break after 8 hours of consecutive driving and allowing that break to be satisfied by a driver using on-duty not driving status rather than off-duty status. The rule also modified the sleeper berth exception to allow drivers to divide the required 10 hours of off-duty time into 2 periods, an 8 and 2 split or a 7 and 3 split, so that offered a little bit more flexibility there. The rule modified the adverse driving conditions exception by extending by 2 hours the maximum driving window during which driving is permitted. And that 4th and final revision involved changing the short haul exception available to certain drivers by lengthening their maximum on-duty period from 12 to 14 hours and extending the distance limit within which they can travel from 100 air miles to 150 air miles. So as you can see, Michael, just from those 4 revisions, kind of the hallmark of this final rule was increased flexibility for truck drivers. It was something that truckers had really been voicing a lot of opinions about, and it was sure enough granted in this final rule. And, in addition to granting flexibility, these modernized HOS rules were designed to be cost efficient. They're supposed to provide nearly $274 million in cost savings for the economy and for American consumers. So those were kind of the considerations that were taken into account when FMCSA unveiled this final rule. So those 4 provisions were what's in the final rule. Let's talk for just a minute about what was absent from this key final rule. Something that was absent from the final rule was the provision included in an earlier August proposal that would have paused the truck driver's driving window. This proposed change would have allowed an off-duty break of at least 30 minutes, but not more than 3 hours, to pause a truck driver's 14-hour window. And it was not included in the final rule, but it is something that FMCSA probably will continue to look at in the future. They have not quite said goodbye to that. They're still looking at that. So those were the the key revisions included in this final rule.
One of the things that helps out carriers and drivers, will be this rule, of course, but with all change, there's probably some resistance or just maybe a fear of new policy. What has the FMCSA done to help carriers and drivers better understand the regulations?
Well, that's a great question, and indeed they they didn't leave the industry high and dry here. They definitely gave them some educational tools. The HOS rules, which, like I said, they were announced in the middle of May, they finally went into effect September 29th. And on that date, September 29th, FMCSA launched an online tool to help with education surrounding these hours of service regulations. It is called the Educational Tool for Hours of Service, also known as ETHOS. You got to love that name, right? For hours of service. And it basically allows users, in anybody can use this, by the way. It can be you or me, in addition to a fleet owner, can go in and basically create a mock duty day. They can enter duty statuses into a log. They can identify potential violations. It's basically to help people understand the provisions of their day and where they're allowed to take breaks. It's meant to serve as a visualization tool. And that's pretty important. Sometimes it can be hard to calculate hours if you're just thinking of the hours in your day, but this really allows people to visualize their workday. And it also identifies potential violations of rules related to the 11-hour driving limit, the 14-hour driving window, the 30-minute rest break, and the sleeper berth provision. So how it's used is a person can go online and they can enter a date, time, type of event. They can enter driving or off duty. They can enter a scenario related to the 30-minute rest break rule. And what Ethos does is it provides a record of duty status. And that reflects intervals of time that you're spent driving, on duty, off duty, or in the sleeper berth. And it also flags potential violations. So it's basically meant to serve as a visualization tool, which can be used by drivers, but it can also be used by fleet managers and, by people who are in charge of sending people out on dispatches. It's kind of meant to serve as an educational tool. And it's no coincidence. This was released on September 29th, the day that those final rules took effect. And it's kind of meant to go hand in hand with the final rules as the industry adjusts to this pretty big change.
Speaking of adjustments, Eleanor, the gears of government grind slowly, as we all know. Such as this rule and just the implementation of this rule and the explanation to the carriers and drivers. As we all know, we're going to have a change in government next month. What are some of the things that you're looking at in regard to this rule as we are getting a new administration? What are the things you are looking for?
Well, I'll tell you, and it has to do actually, one of the things that I'm looking for has to do with one of the things that was absent from the completed final rule that was published in May. It has to do with that certain provision related to pausing the 14-hour driving window that didn't quite make it into the final rule. It was absent. But FMCSA has not completely abandoned attention to it. FMCSA has launched the split duty period pilot program, which would allow participating drivers to pause their on-duty driving time with one off-duty period of at least 30 minutes, but not more than 3 hours. And the reason that's sounding so familiar is because that's what was omitted from the final rule on hours of service. FMCSA is collecting public comment on this pilot program, and they're going to get it going and look at the results from it to basically see if there's merit in this program and in this certain measure related to hours of service. Now, participation in this pilot program is limited to a certain number of CDL holders. It's basically going to serve as a study group representing small, medium, and large carriers, as well as owner operators. And this is basically for the agency to take a look at the safety and the feasibility of what such a modification would mean to the hours of service rules.
And as with any agency, especially with a Biden administration coming in, the roles and maybe the direction may change. So there's a lot of mystery, I guess, with the new rule for this new year.
Yeah, that's something that we'll be keeping an eye on. Of course, this final rule took effect in September, and then FMCSA has also launched plenty of pilot programs, but this one that I'm speaking of specifically has to do with another modification of HOS and whether it holds any merit. So what I'm personally going to be keeping an eye on is the hours of service rules as they were put into their final form this fall. And then any future modifications that might come our way, not the least of which might have to do with the split duty period pilot program. So we'll see how these modifications and these rules live on.
We will definitely be watching this space, Eleanor. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your insight on this particular topic. Thank you for the conversation.
I've really enjoyed it.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.
I would like to thank Seth Clevenger and Eleanor Lamb for joining the program to review this past year in trucking. Before we close, let's take a moment to revisit our original questions. How has the trucking industry fared this year in the areas of technology, equipment safety, and regulation? And what non-COVID events proved to be most impactful in 2020? In the future, the year 2020, perhaps even uttering the word 2020, will universally refer to a time of upending and unnerving change. And we will discuss that obvious elephant in the room in our next episode. However, there is change nonetheless in any period of time. The hours of service rule changes from the FMCSA, plus the mentioned mergers in tech, will have a ripple effect in 2021. As for fleet companies, they will always search for ways to perform more effectively as well as efficiently. Equipment and driver safety and assuaging the lingering labor issues will always be in the forefront of the minds of industry leaders. Although items such as autonomous vehicles and 5G are in the infancy of the planning stage, the industry is becoming more aware of these groundbreaking shifts and are preparing accordingly in the long-term future. There has been progress, but everyone agrees there's more to be done. If you enjoyed this episode of Road Signs, please let others know. Rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. If my questions have sparked questions of your own, share them with the Road Signs team and reach me on Twitter at Michael V. Freeze. You can email us at share@ttnews.com. We'll read them and respond daily. And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Road Signs. Until then, I'm Michael Freeze. Thank you for listening.